This next story will show you that not everything that shimmers is gold. The name of this tale is Angel Feathers. You know the drill, listener beware. And let me tell you a story. Amongst a river of red and gold, it was the light blue of the facade that caught my eye. It was uncommon to see such a store in Chinatown. The eternal rest was probably full of sheets, pillows, mattresses, any kind of products that ensured a restful sleep at night. It was either that or a funeral home, which sounded too out of place. My surprise only increased when curiosity led me inside the establishment. There were no caskets nor ash urns. However, there was no much more to see either. Instead of a wide range of nocturnal comfort products above them, the shelves were empty and they were decidedly neglected. They weren't full of cobwebs, but almost. The lights were dim and nobody seemed to be tending to the place. The shop had a pedestal right in its center. On it, a single pillow rested undisturbed. It was, it seemed, the pièce de résistance of the store. Or it should be if its whole business model was based on it. I approached it. I'm not sure why. After all, I had seen dozens just like that one over the years. A classic feather pillow. They weren't my favorites. The one I had had started to stink after the first wash. Maybe remembering the smell was what made me frown. Yet, I felt more disgust than I should have. I should have walked away right then, when there was still time to get out of that place without looking back and forgetting about it completely. Obviously, I stayed, standing, gawking at a pillow that didn't even interest me as a buyer. I don't know where the shopkeeper arrived from. Like a cliche, I didn't hear when he opened the main door, and as if he had magically appeared behind me, I let him startle me with the high pitch of his voice when he said hi. I greeted him back with an ill-starred smile and a frog in the throat. I see you're interested in the product, he said, and his pink and chubby cheeks trembled timidly when he spoke. He sounded like a child. He looked like a child, like one of those blue-eyed, fair-haired puttae that represent Cupid or some sweet cherub on a painting. That's why his next words seemed strange. It's made of the finest angel feather. Angel feather. Repeating myself was all I could do. The man nodded silently, smiling. His curls oscillated like lustrous golden pendulums, and, of course, his teeth as white as mother of pearl seemed to shine like a distant but warm star. His presence was homely. It felt like reuniting with a friend I hadn't seen in a long time. Everything about that man inspired confidence, and it even touched me. He was so damned angelical. And where does it come from? From heaven, he said laconically. Well, yes, I said, thinking that most birds flew. But I'm talking about the fowl. What animal does it come from? Angels are not animals, he said, still smiling. But they don't allow their wings to be taken, let alone for a pillow, I said, following along with the joke. I was used to dealing with such humorous merchants. They'd be fallen angels without their wings. Maybe they weren't taken from them. Maybe they were given. For a pillow? My tone grew sarcastic. The man kept his tranquil disposition. He remained silent. I don't know if I expected the conversation to continue, but I didn't move either. I started to feel awkward. I should have left. There was still time. I didn't. I'd like to say that my hand acted on its own accord, but that would be a lie. It was me who forced it to move towards the pillow. The man cleared his throat before I could reach it. Touching is not allowed, he said. Yes, I felt my cheeks blush. I didn't stop to think how ridiculous it was to not be able to try an item before buying it. I'm sorry. I started to turn to the exit. It costs $100. $100! My eyes popped. Most standard-sized feather pillows cost $30, and that was for a pair. $50, maybe, in case of a prestigious brand. I shouldn't have asked. What is so special about it? It's made of angel feathers. And what does that mean? Now my tone grew exasperated. You will find no better pillow in all of creation, he said. Your rest will be so profound you will taste divinity. Right, I said. It's a bit expensive. Would you put a price on the opportunity to enter paradise, to see the host of angels and God Himself? I couldn't help but laugh. Is that what this pillow offers? It's made of angel feathers, repeated the merchant, as if that was the only description his product required. I'm afraid I don't have that kind of money. Excuse me. I bowed slightly and walked towards the door. Of course, I see your point. Who could put an entry fee on Eden? It's something that cannot be bought. It's something ineffable. What would you be willing to give for it? For entering paradise or for this pillow? My question was asked in genuine confusion. They are the same thing. Right. I rolled my eyes. The conversation had become too bizarre for my taste. I'll tell you what. The man approached me. He walked but seemed to glide like a swan over water. I'll let you take it with you on one condition. Yeah? Which one? You must give me something very important in return. What? A last chill ran down my back. It was the final warning, the one that reminds you that there's no turning back if you make the wrong choice. Your worth. What? Funny how the same question, the same word, changes its meaning entirely with different intonations. I want you to give me your word, to promise me that you will treat it with due respect. I want to know that I am leaving these angel feathers in good hands, capable of treating them properly. No, thank you. I should have said it. It was a pillow I was not interested in, obtained in a weird situation and from a man with unknown intentions. It wasn't even out of curiosity. It was because a $100 product was being gifted to me in exchange of a simple and intangible promise. Okay, it's a deal. I shook his hand and claimed my prize. Truth be told, it was pretty pleasant to touch it. I left it on the car's co-pilot's seat and didn't stop caressing it on the way back home. It was silk or some other equally delicate fabric. Yet, as all of their kind, it was so hot it made my palms sweat a lot. I had to wipe my hand on my pants several times to dry it, but not for a moment did I stop touching that pillow, and I started to consider how convenient it would be to use it at night. After all, I used to turn them constantly to take advantage of their freshness, and it never occurred to me to remember that I wasn't even interested in buying a new one, especially if it was stuffed with feathers. When I got home, I gently put it on the bed and forgot about it for the rest of the day. It was Sunday, and my routine consisted on preparing everything I would need throughout the working week that was about to start. Do the laundry, cook some simple meals. It wasn't fun, but it was necessary. Just a normal day. I was exhausted by nightfall, not because of the workload I had endured, but for the content that I had consumed. I had grown accustomed to binge watching TV shows on weekends, and I used to end up so tired and so late in the evening that it was a miracle I could still find my way to bed. Without thinking about it, I placed the feather pillow over the others and sank my face in it. It didn't take long before I fell asleep. The clock's calls were distant, and I barely could open my eyes and wake up. The alarm had been running for almost 20 minutes, giving a new depth to its name and telling me that such delay would require an incredible speed when cleaning myself up. The quick shower with cold water didn't entice me to shave, so I decided to skip it for one day. And instead of hot coffee, I gulped a glass of juice fresh out of the refrigerator. I think I didn't wash my teeth. Despite my efforts, I was late to the office. Thanks to traffic, I was scanning my access card at the entrance almost an hour after my usual one. Quietly, I reached my cubicle, turned on the computer, and avoided going to the kitchenette for a cup of joe. I felt ashamed, as if 1,000 accusatory eyes were fixed on every inch of myself. Dahlia came to visit me. What did you do to yourself? My best office friend. It wasn't strange that her first question was about my looks. With so little time to groom myself, it was logical that I was not very presentable. I lied. I told her that the alarm clock hadn't worked and that not waking up in time was why I looked so unkempt. What are you talking about? Her teasing giggles got my attention. You look juvenile, she said. She had to leave before I could question her further. Someone was calling her. It was time to get in front of a mirror. In the restroom, I noticed that I indeed looked quite good. Fresh. There were no bags under my eyes and my cheeks were rosy and healthy, just like a baby's. Upon touching them, I discovered that my skin was also soft and smooth. Strange. My thick beard used to give me no truce, and there were days in which, after a clean shave in the morning, I already had a blackish shadow in the evening. Physically, I felt wonderful. I had had such a great night's sleep that it had cost me a lot of effort to even acknowledge it was time to get up. I didn't even remember dreaming. It had been the most restful night I had had in a long time. I smiled at my reflection. I winked at it, actually, and I went back to my cubicle. I stayed at the office 1 hour after my usual, accounting for the one I had taken before arriving. I returned home. I had so much energy that I went jogging, and I stopped only because I didn't like running in the dark. Despite the physical activity, I wasn't hungry, and I didn't fancy the chicken breast and roasted eggplant that was waiting for me in the refrigerator since the day before either. I wasn't sleepy. Still, I slid under the blankets before midnight. My brain was still active, eager to keep me awake and doing something more fun than staring at the ceiling. But I decided it would be better to try and get some rest. I didn't want to feel weary or not hear the alarm again next morning. Boredom made me twist and roll all over the bed. I pushed the covers only to pull them over me right away. Moodiness often creeps so slowly within that, when identified, one is already drowning in it. I turned the pillow several times. Its touch was still pleasant, although I found it different. It had seemed softer the night before. My head wasn't sinking as much in it, as if it had lost volume. Nonsense, I thought. It was my grumpiness that made me find flaws in everything. My mouth was wide open when I woke up. Immediately, I took my hand to my chin. It was dry, but that was no guarantee. Full of fear, I touched the pillow. It didn't have traces of liquid either. Even benumbed and in the dark, I could notice my automatic grimace when I took it to my nose. Apparently, I hadn't drooled over it. I sighed with relief. The alarm clock went off and I felt even more calm, knowing I was beginning my day on schedule. Between yawns, after turning the boiler on this time, I staggered into the shower. I shampooed my hair and spread its lather over my face. I was ready to shave, but something felt off. I rubbed my cheeks slowly with a little more care. There were small bulges over both. Pimples. I hated them. Again, my skin was soft and smooth, something strange in its own right, so I decided I could wait another day without hurting it with the razor. I stepped out of the shower, had my breakfast in somewhat of a hurry, and rushed to the office. I arrived on time. I was able to go to the kitchenette for my coffee, and I met up with Dahlia as I used to. Instead of giggles like the day before, she looked at me with a frown and pity-filled eyes. That looks painful, she said, rubbing her cheeks. Instinctively, I took my hand to mine. I thought it was my nerves for being under my friend's scrutiny, but the pimple felt much bigger than a couple of hours earlier. Much bigger. Some 3 or 4 times the size it was. And on both sides. Yes, I stammered and finished covering my face. We remained silent for a moment, and I felt as if the awkwardness had a physical, palpable body. Have you got much work to do? I tried to make the question quickly. Of course, my hands stayed on my face. Back in my cubicle, I decided it would be best to hide in a place that had a mirror, so I ran to the restroom. My embarrassment was so great that I had started sweating, and I knew I was completely red. I watched myself for the first time since the previous day and saw them. They were two volcanoes ready to erupt, and they were pulsating. I noticed it because my eyes were fixed on them, spellbound by a terrible morbidity that squeezed my stomach. As if that subcutaneous fat was shuffling and reshuffling, my skin seemed to boil subtly. For a second, I thought they were no more than tics, nervous spasms on my disfigured face. But when my cheeks kept moving after 15 minutes, I decided it was something else. I used to be vain, so I convinced myself it was my mind playing tricks on me. I was giving those two pimples too much importance, and my ego had exacerbated the feeling in my heart, one of fear and repulsion. I calmed down. I took several deep breaths. I did the only thing I could. I went back to my daily business and tried to concentrate on it. Of course, I never stopped covering my face or trying to keep my head low so that no one could watch me more than they needed to. And I even remained hidden at lunch. I was not hungry anyway. I left the office 15 minutes early so to avoid as much human contact as possible until I could solve my situation. I bought a benzoyl peroxide treatment for acne and hurried home. I washed my face hard, perhaps harder than necessary, and I spread copious amounts of the cream over the affected areas. I sat on the living room's couch. Immobile, I tried to think of nothing. My state of mind was worse than it should. A curious apathy attacked me, enveloping me in a strange numbness. Everything was cloudy and gray, and I couldn't understand any thought that came to my head. All my ideas bumped into each other, and their crashing ended up causing me a delicious migraine. I went to bed after midnight. Tiredness still took a while to knock me out, so I had plenty of time to relish the pain and ennui. I remained face up so that the cream didn't stain the pillows. My cheeks itched more and more, and the only thing that comforted me was the belief that the sting was a sign of improvement. Besides, the pressure I felt in my skull was much worse than the impossibility of scratching. It was as if I had an owl struck in my occiput. I woke up to the song of the alarm. The first thing I did was wash my face and analyze the progress. I didn't expect the pimples to vanish overnight, but neither that they had grown, that they'd gotten so big. I rubbed my eyes and sighed, and I even shook my head in a classic motion of disbelief. I looked as if I had 4 cheekbones, with those 2 mountains of fat growing beneath my normal structure, even getting larger than it. I was a monster, physically speaking. I was amazed that my fears were not completely unfounded, that the excessive anxiety I had felt was the omen of an abnormal ailment. My situation had become a medical emergency, and I even thought those bulges were not fat pockets but some superhuman and surely unknown infection. I had bought a couple of cloth face masks at the pharmacy the day before. I had to use both to hide all of my face. Covered as a disfigured victim, I exited the house. I came back almost immediately. It was still dark and the clinic was probably still closed. I considered going to the emergency room but decided to visit someone I trusted first. After nearly 2 hours of pacing like a caged lion, I went back to the street. Ofelia Saldivar, my dermatologist, used to see me without previous appointment. After all, I was one of her best customers. She asked me the usual questions before the examination. I hadn't changed my diet. I noticed I hadn't eaten in 2 days and still wasn't hungry, nor was I using any hygiene or beauty product that may have caused such a reaction. I hadn't even shaven for some days. Her frown and absolute silence when she touched my horrendous protuberances didn't reassure me. When did the discomfort begin? Yesterday morning, I answered. No, what I mean is, when did the comedones appear? She said and pointed at one of her cheeks. Yesterday morning, I repeated. I could tell she didn't believe me, but it was true. I had no reason to lie. Ophelia prescribed me some lab tests. Carefully, she told me that the masses were pretty hard and that she wanted to make sure there was no anomalous cell growth in the area. Cancer, I thought, and my heart churned. Could it develop that fast? Impossible. I wasn't going to be left wondering. Are they tumorous? My throat had closed. The question barely came out. She tried to calm me for almost half an hour. She explained that not all abscesses meant that which I feared, but she could have used the word boil or cyst or any other synonym, and I could have stayed in the same restless state. I suspended the benzoyl peroxide treatment and did everything the doctor told me, including eating something low in fats and sugars. Grudgingly, I forced myself to finish the chicken breast and eggplant that I hadn't touched since the weekend. I found the dish insipid, but worse was the way it made me feel. I was full after a couple of bites, and my abdomen inflated like a balloon, as if I had had a feast. I supposed it was due to how erratic my diet had been, and I tried to think of something else. I felt a sting on my head, again on the occiput. I called the office to let them know I was taking a sick day. It wasn't something they appreciated, but what were they going to do about it? In that moment, the least of my worries was to be in good terms with my boss. I felt spent. I walked to my room, to my bed. It wasn't made. I thought about crawling under the sheets. I had some time before my appointment at the lab. Something yanked at my gut. Then I saw it. The feather pillow was the only change I had made to my everyday routine, and I had stuffed my face in it for the past 2 nights. That was what had infected me. How right was my mother every time she told me to wash any piece of clothing before letting it touch my skin. I felt sick. I felt full of anger, in part against me for being such an idiot, and in part against the one that had sold it to me. No, the one that had gifted it to me. I put on the face masks. The doctor told me not to, but I couldn't help it. I grabbed the pillow. It felt lighter and even looked smaller, as if it had lost some of its contents. I checked between the other pillows, all along the bed and under it, but there were no feathers anywhere. Whatever. It didn't have to be in its pristine state when I faced the merchant. I must confess my driving was less than empathic. Being upset makes you behave in uncivilized ways. I arrived shortly at Chinatown. I growled when I went down the wrong street. I turned and realized my first choice had been right. I pulled over by the pavement exactly where I had done so last Sunday. I climbed down from the car. I scratched my head and laughed. Of course, the eternal rest was not there. In fact, the store had altogether disappeared, leaving an ampler space to the adjacent shops. I asked them both, and both keepers looked at me as if I were a madman. A store like the one I described didn't exist and had never existed. I touched my face, feeling my pimples over the mask's fabric. I was crazy. That was it. I went back home. Halfway, I noticed the time. I changed course towards the lab. I thought the MRI was uncomfortable, but I was so uneasy with everything that I didn't think too much of my feelings. They gave me my results almost immediately, and I checked them in the same manner. A biopsy is required. I felt like crying. Once more, Ophelia tried to calm me down. She assured me that labs were, after all, a business, and that the more studies they could sell, the better. Still, she told me it would be convenient to see my primary physician. She prescribed me a medicine with retinol, advised me to keep my face clean and uncovered, and sent me on my way. Back in my car, I remained silent for a few minutes. I called Lucila Ilesca's office. She could see me at 6. I went home. The first thing I did was clear the bed and change the sheets as well as the pillowcases. The feather one I had already disposed of at the pharmacist's dumpster. At last, I was again thinking logically, and the most reasonable explanation was that that thing had caused me a topical infection. The mind often plays tricks on one, especially when obfuscated with fear. I didn't have cancer, for crying out loud. It was just a case of mild acne. Well, it was a severe case, but nothing more than a subcutaneous fat and bacteria accumulation. I took my dermatologist's advice to heart because I turned the boiler on and stepped into the shower. I let the warm water fall over every inch of my body for a long time before rubbing it. My heart jumped again when I felt the hair on my back. The latter had never been smooth, and I was accustomed to a normal quantity of the former, but the thick hunks that dangled from my shoulder blades and all the way to my lower back were unfamiliar. The mirror confirmed what my touch had told me. Not all my back was covered, just 2 straight and vertical lines that started on my shoulders. And it wasn't hair. It was white and coarser, like a feathery tuft. My head ached. Then I supposed it was stress. It never occurred to me to touch my occiput. Partly that was a good thing. That way, I didn't discover the third ball that was protruding from my head. I was so full of feeling that I had to take it out somehow. Luckily, I was already in the bathroom, so I threw up in the toilet. Everything I had eaten went out almost as full as it had entered. Tore by my teeth, yes, but as if my gastric juices hadn't had time to decompose it. I touched myself again, kept looking at my body in the mirror. I was trying to find logical explanations to my situation. I could only arrive at one conclusion. I was mutating. Somehow my body was changing, probably for being in contact with a strange agent, for being contaminated. I hesitated. Maybe I didn't want my doctor to examine me, not out of shame this time, but out of fear. I had seen too many films where mutants were not cured but dissected and studied. I shook my head in disapproval. I had really gone insane. Maybe I was still asleep. It made no difference. Conscious or not, as a madman, I was trapped within my mind and was not able to remember that I had to escape. I felt dizzy and I had to sit down. I did, naked, on the bathroom's cold ceramic tile. Maybe I was dead, and every sensation I thought I perceived were only new tortures in the strange hell that I had come to. I tried to pluck one of those things from my back. It was so firmly ingrained that my skin began to break and bleed. I stopped pulling before I took a chunk of meat away. It indeed looked like a feather, and to think about the pillow made me remember what the merchant had told me. Taste divinity. Enter paradise and see God himself. I wasn't sure if the taste of bile came from the vomit or from the anger. Then I thought that maybe I had just imagined that man. After all, he did look like a caricature. I growled when I remember I had thrown the pillow away. It was the only physical proof of having met him and, more important, perhaps the only chance to figure out what was wrong with me. Mumbling curses, I returned to the pharmacy's dumpster. It was still there, albeit now covered in crap. I pulled it out, shook it as best as I could, and I stuffed it in the trunk, all while fighting the nausea. Inside the car, I discovered that something had splashed on me. I yelled and raged. I took my hands to my face. Of course, the pimples had grown again. After an eternal wait, the evening finally arrived. Lucila did what Ophelia hath. She carefully read my test results and agreed with the biopsy. She didn't believe me either when I told her that my condition had started on Monday morning. She or any other doctor, they all would have treated me the same way. More visits to the lab, more pills. They all would have seen with bewilderment and utter fear the feathers on my back. Truth be told, I don't blame her. To find oneself face to face with something so strange and remain even-tempered is nigh impossible. She did the only thing she could. The Center for Disease Control put her under quarantine too, something she certainly didn't expect or wanted. And they also put her secretary and one of her patients in quarantine, something that's never good for business. The center's technicians, fully wrapped in hazmat suits, undressed and cleaned me thoroughly. They didn't have the best bedside manners. They performed a myriad studies on me. On the bright side, I wouldn't have to pay for them. The problem was that they tried to cut me, though. The scalpels, no matter how sharp, were ineffective against my skin. They couldn't even take samples of the feathers that slowly but surely were populating every inch of my back. Something so frail that should have been easy to pluck with the fingers refused to break up and stop being a part of my new anatomy. That baffled them a lot. Not me. It may have 3 or 4 days before, but I was used to the weirdness by then. Nothing caused me surprise. One more sigh, another shrug. Everything was the same to me, even the pain. Actually, I didn't feel any pain. They seized my belongings. They put my car under quarantine and took the pillow out of the trunk to analyze it. They questioned me more than once to make sure I was lying, I suppose. I told them the same thing always because I was telling the truth. I don't know what time it was when they finally let me rest. They prepared cots for everyone but kept me isolated from the rest. It was uncomfortable and squeaked horribly, but I was so exhausted that I swiftly fell asleep. I woke up I was sore, and the balls I felt on my back were my numbed muscles after spending the night over such an unfriendly surface. I cracked my neck. I turned around, then downwards. The feather pillow was there, over the cot, thinner than before. I made a big fuss, and the technicians that tried to calm me down never understood that I was cursing them for letting me spend the night with that thing. I didn't understand then that it hadn't been them. I was inexorably linked to that pillow already, or more specifically, to the feathers within. If I had stayed home, the same thing would have happened, and I could have turned even crazier. They had to sedate me. They were my last hours on earth, and I spent them unconscious. The leather straps they secured me with didn't bug me. I had other preoccupations in my head. Literally. I could see my comedones. It was as if I were puffing my cheeks. They'd be the size of apples right now, and even though I couldn't distinguish them, I knew their shapes were irregular, whimsical. They would not give me a mirror, probably because they were mad at my outburst. Yet, the bother in their eyes was mixed with fear. Those bulges must have been really macabre. I don't quite remember what happened next. I was off. I think I cried like never before and never again. My main feeling throughout the experience had been of embarrassment, and then it got much more awkward. My body arched, with my wrists and ankles tied, as if something was growing between the cot and me. Most of the pressure was on my back, but I also felt it on my occiput. Although my vision was getting cloudier, I could see more. It was strange. I sensed shadows in more than 180 degrees. They were shapeless, but they were there. I remember having thought that my pimples had turned into eyes. Anything was possible in my mutation, so I let my imagination fly. Now I was a monster with at least half a dozen eyeballs. The problem was they all had cataracts. Everything was gray and gloomy. They studied me some more. They tried to cut me again, didn't succeed. They sounded frustrated. I heard them argue about many subjects, including how one of them was chewed out for letting the contaminated pillow find its way to my cot again. Of course, none of them had been responsible, but someone had to be guilty. We all have a cross to bear. Then came the screams of desperation and madness. I don't know what happened. I could feel the people's dread. I knew it was because of me, and I didn't like being the source of such fits. I noticed my ears were somewhat clogged. I heard muffled steps running around and fists knocking on the walls and nails scratching on smooth surfaces. It was chilling. The mad one was me, not them, and the only reason I could find for their demeanor was that I had infected them. I think I passed out because immediately came the clouds. I was floating, surrounded by cotton clouds, just like in a dream. I was lucid, and up high in the sky the environment was nothing but a nice mixture of blue and white tones. It was the first time I felt at peace since the weekend. The only thing I could think was that I had died and that, after all, I had reached heaven. I noticed that I could now see in 360 degrees. I was conscious of everything that happened in front, behind, and to the sides of my body. And speaking of which, it was covered by long, beautiful wings. They were 4 in total, and instead of making me fly, they were fixed on hiding every inch of my being. I soon found out they were under my command, so I spread them. Almost everything was in place. Arms, torso, legs, and feet. I was naked. The fact that my penis was gone didn't impress me too much. I touched my forehead, nose, my mouth. Then I took my hands to my cheeks. Those were also gone. In their place were strange snouts. I didn't know then what animals they belonged to. In the back of my head was another face, a bird's one. I knew that much because it had a beak. I could have stayed floating adrift without knowing what to do if they hadn't come for me. "You are not Rick Biel," said one of the 2 entities approaching me. They were tetramorphs, 4 wings, 4 faces. I didn't take long to decide that that was how I looked, and that the faces around mine were of a lion, an ox, and an eagle. I said nothing. "Well then," said the other, "let's go." "Where to?" My voice was different to what I recalled. Same as theirs, it had become high, like a child's. Let's go home. Home? What home? Didn't Rick Biel explain it to you? Explain what? They looked at each other for a moment, then turned their concerned expressions towards me. Did you accept the trade without asking to be explained all the deal's details? Trade? Deal? What are you talking about? Who is Rick Biel? Who are you? One of them sighed with pity. You accepted that an angel gave you his wings. You are aware of that, right? What? You accepted that Rigbiel gifted you his wings. I have never. It hit me like a bucket of cold water. The eternal rest, the angel feather pillow, the high pitched voice of the merchant, and his aspect, similar to that of the cherubs. To taste divinity and enter paradise and see the celestial host. Of course, he never told me I would have to stay there forever, that I would turn into. Well then, let's go home, said one of those angels that had come for me, when he saw in my eyes that everything had become clear, that I understood what my new place was. Wait, is this normal? Are these traits common? Not really. A couple of times in the last 3,000 years. Not many humans are willing to the routine. Routine? The angels smiled. It's time to go home. They said nothing more. They glided gracefully upwards, elevating more and more. I followed them. What else could I do? I had been tricked, but what could I do about it? That happened almost 130 years ago. At least I think so. Life here is indeed a monotonous routine. All we cherubs do is carry God's throne and sing his praises. All day, every day. My count had been pretty accurate until the century, but your mind becomes slow after such a long time of repeating the same prayers without rest. Now, I am waiting for vacation. A newly created or swindled and turned angel like me can take a break after his first 500 years of service. At least that's what they told me before putting me beneath God's huge pedestal and assuring me that the chant's lyrics would come to me effortlessly as soon as I gave myself to the divine current. Only 370 more years and I will be able to go back to Earth, and someone will be able to take my place. If I manage to convince them, of course. But I have faith that it won't be difficult once I get the chance. After a long time up here, I have become very persuasive. Beware the deals you make and try not to fall prey to vanity. I'll see you when I see you.